What are the basic tenets of political anthropology?
Okay. So political anthropology, at its core, really studies three things: power, authority, and leadership. And crucially, how these things look and work differently across all sorts of cultures.
It sounds quite a bit like political science, though. So where's the specific focus here?
Yeah, that's a really important distinction. Political science tends to focus almost exclusively on societies with formal governments, states.
Okay.
Political anthropology casts a much wider net. It really got going around 1940. There was this key work, African political systems.
Ah, I've heard of that one.
Yeah, and it highlighted that political organization isn't just about parliaments or laws. It's fundamentally about maintaining orderly social relations
Yeah.
everywhere.
So the big takeaway is that political anthropology is more exhaustive. It covers states, sure,
Yeah,
but also stateless societies.
exactly. That's the key. John Beatty put it nicely. It's about order. How do you maintain order with the central government? Okay, political science looks at that.
Hmm.
But how do you maintain order in a small nomadic group with no chief, no police, no written laws? That's where political anthropology really shines.
Right. Think about it for yourself. If the police vanished from your town tomorrow, what happens?
Chaos, probably.
Probably.
Yeah.
Now imagine a society where that kind of structure never even existed. That's the kind of thing we're talking about with stateless societies.
And we study them in sort of two main ways. First, statically, what were these traditional societies like before major contact with modern states?
Okay.
And second, dynamically, how are they changing now as they interact with and move towards modern state structures? It's an ongoing thing.
That dynamic aspect is super important today, I bet.
Definitely helps understand global issues.
Okay, that difference between having central power and, well, not having it, that's a great lead in to our next topic. Let's describe the various types of stateless political organizations found in human societies.
Right. So, stateless organizations, sometimes they're called acephalous.
Acephalous.
It literally means without a head.
Right.
So, no central leader, no hierarchy. They tend to be egalitarian, found in simpler societies where kinship is everything.
Makes it.
And we can break them down into roughly four main types based on how they're structured.
Okay, let's start with the simplest one. What's a band?
So, bands are what you typically find among hunter-gatherer groups. Very small, maybe, 6 to 10 families, nomadic, always moving.
Right.
And there's really no formal authority figure. Decisions have to be made by consensus because, honestly, serious conflict could just tear the whole small group apart. Survival depends on getting along.
And that need to avoid conflict leads to some really amazing cultural solutions, right? Like the Inuit example.
Oh, absolutely. The Inuit in the Arctic have this incredible mechanism called song duels.
Song duels. Tell me more.
It's fascinating. If there's a dispute, the two people involved compose songs basically insulting and making fun of each other.
Like a rap battle.
Sort of. They perform them publicly and they go back and forth until one person gets exhausted or the audience basically decides who won by cheering for the one they feel is in the right.
Wow. So it's nonviolence saves face.
Exactly. The whole point is to restore social harmony, not really to punish someone.
Okay, that's wild. What's the next level up from a band?
Next, you often find village-based societies. Think of the Ibo in Nigeria.
Okay.
These are settled communities, separate villages. They have a sense of territory, but the boundaries might not be strictly defined or enforced.
Right.
They might have elected councils, representatives. But here's the key thing. Those councils usually only have advisory power.
Ah, so still no one who can truly force compliance.
Pretty much. The pressure is still social, based on community opinion, not institutional force.
Got it. Now, what about these age-set systems? You mentioned they're often found in groups that move around a lot.
Yeah, age-set-based societies are common among pastoral herders like the Maasai in Kenya and Tanzania because they're often moving with their animals. Organizing purely by family descent gets tricky.
So they use age.
Exactly. Society is structured into age grades like, childhood, warriorhood, elderhood. It cuts across family lines.
And who makes the decisions?
In systems like the Maasai, it's the elderhood. And their decisions are considered mandatory, binding.
Okay, so there is authority here.
Mm-hmm.
But how is it enforced if they're moving around? No police force, right?
Right, and this is the really interesting part. Enforcement comes from the belief in the supernatural.
Ah,
The collective belief is that if you disobey the elders' decisions, supernatural forces, spirits, ancestors, whatever, will punish you. Sickness, bad luck, you name it.
so fear of divine wrath replaces the police officer.
Yeah.
That's clever social control.
It's incredibly effective in that context. Finally, we have lineage-based societies, often found in horticultural groups growing crops.
Okay.
Here, authority is definitely present and centralized, but only at the lineage level. Think large extended family groups, often based on patrilineal descent.
So strong leaders within families, but no overall king or president for everyone.
Exactly. A classic example is the Nuer of South Sudan. studied by Evans Pritchard.
Right, the Nuer. And they have this system involving blood feuds, don't they? That sounds pretty rough.
It does sound harsh to us, but it's a mechanism for maintaining balance or demographic equilibrium between potentially hostile lineages. If someone from lineage A kills someone from lineage B feels obligated to retaliate to restore the balance.
Okay, so it's a form of justice in a way.
Yeah.
But how do they stop it from just escalating forever?
That's where the leopard skin chief comes in. This isn't a political ruler with power. They're a ritual mediator, usually from a neutral lineage respected by both sides.
Neutral party.
Yes. Their job is to step in, perform purification rituals, negotiate compensation, and basically cool things down to prevent endless cycles of violence, restore peace.
It really seems like kinship family ties is the absolute foundation for politics in all these stateless societies.
Absolutely central. Which brings us neatly to comparing them directly with state systems. Let's tackle that.
Yeah.
Differentiate between state and stateless political organizations.
Okay, the big comparison. Where do we start?
Well, let's revisit Beattie's idea of maintaining order. How do they fundamentally differ in function? We can look at a few key areas.
All right. How about the nature of the society itself and territory?
Good place to start. State societies are generally heterogeneous. Lots of different people, maybe different languages, cultures, all under one government. Stateless societies tend to be much more homogenous, strong shared kinship, culture, language,
Makes sense.
and territory.
States have clearly defined fixed boundaries,
Mhm.
borders that are legally recognized and defended. Stateless societies, it varies. Bands might have territories they use, but not defended borders. Village or lineage societies might have clearer territories, but again, often without those sharply defined policed boundaries like a modern nation state.
Okay. But the absolute core difference has to be about authority and enforcement, right? Where does the power actually sit and how is it used?
Absolutely crucial. Let's call it the locus of authority. In a state, it's always there, it's defined, it's centralized at the top.
Yeah.
Think presidents, kings, parliaments.
Exactly. In stateless systems, it's all over the place. Sometimes it's basically absent, like in bands or advisory village councils. Sometimes it's strong, but only at the family level, like lineages. Sometimes it's diffused among elders, like age sets.
And that directly impacts how rules are enforced, I imagine.
Totally. A state organization ultimately relies on the threat or use of physical force.
Police, military?
Right. Sanctioned by formal law, carried out by, bureaucrats who are usually strangers. In stateless systems, enforcement relies on those social sanctions we talked about, especially the fear of being cut off by your kin.
Reciprocity.
Yeah, or, as with the Maasai, the belief in supernatural force. Administration, such as it is done by your relatives, not paid officials.
And what about their main jobs, the primary function?
Also quite different. For a state, arguably, the top priority is defending its territory and its sovereignty, then maybe redistribution, infrastructure, etc. For a stateless society, the absolute number one priority is maintaining internal social order, keeping the peace within the group, because cooperation is essential for survival.
That's a really stark contrast in priorities.
It is. But we should add that caveat. Again, these are sort of ideal types based on the static view.
Right. The reality today is much more blurred, with all societies interacting with state systems.
Exactly. The dynamic view is critical now.
Okay. So, sitting between these two poles, the purely stateless and the fully formed state, there's an important middle ground. Let's get into that. Present a holistic analysis of chiefdoms.
Yes, chiefdoms, they're really interesting because they represent that transition. They are centralized organizations.
Centralized. Okay, so like a state.
Getting there, but
Yeah.
not quite. Think of them as intermediate between, say, a tribe, like a lineage-based system, and a full state. They're typically found in societies that are no longer egalitarian. There's ranking.
Examples.
Historically, places like ancient Hawaii, parts of Polynesia, or in Africa, the Baganda or Bunyoro in Uganda had well-developed chiefdoms.
So what's the key feature? What makes it a chiefdom and not just a big tribe?
The main thing is the chief. This is a permanent, full-time political leader, and crucially, they hold real authority.
Meaning their decisions are binding, not just advisory.
Exactly. People have to follow their rulings. Now, they usually lack the huge, complex bureaucracy of a state, no massive civil service or standing army in the same way. But more advanced chiefdoms often have a hierarchy. A paramount chief with lesser chiefs below them, often ranked based on how closely related they are to the paramount chief. Kinship still matters, but it's used to create ranks.
Okay, so there's real political power. But you mentioned they're often tied to the economy too.
Hugely important. Redistribution is often the central economic principle in a chiefdom.
Redistribution, how does that work?
The chief has the right and the obligation to collect surplus goods from the population, food, crafts, whatever.
Okay, like taxes.
Sort of, but the next step is crucial. The chief then redistributes this wealth back to the community, often through big public feasts, communal festivities, or helping out families in need.
Why is that system so central? Why not just let everyone keep their own stuff?
It performs several vital functions. One, it acts as a safety net, making sure everyone gets fed, especially if one family has a bad harvest. Two, it supports the chief and their family, allowing them a higher standard of living, which reinforces their special status.
Hmm.
And three, perhaps most critically, it builds massive loyalty. People see tangible benefits flowing from the chief. It makes the chief's position seem necessary and legitimate. Their power is tied to generosity.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, if these societies are bigger and ranked, I guess disputes might be more common than in a small band.
Definitely. More people, more inequality, potentially more conflict.
So how does the chief handle justice?
Because authority is centralized, the chief typically acts as the final arbitrator and judge. People bring their disputes to the chief or their representatives.
And if it's not clear who's telling the truth?
That's often where the ordeal comes in again, like we mentioned with stateless societies, but here it's administered under the chief's authority. A trial by fire, water, poison, whatever the local custom is, relying on supernatural belief to reveal guilt or innocence.
Wow. So once a society develops this chiefdom structure, with a leader controlling redistribution and justice, it sounds hard to go back.
Very difficult. Unless there's a major catastrophe like population collapse, the community becomes dependent on that central figure. The chief's role becomes indispensable.
Okay. We've looked at bands, villages, age sets, lineages, chiefdoms, and states. Let's zoom in on the concepts that underpin all of them. Let's briefly discuss the concepts of power and authority.
Right. These two terms get used interchangeably all the time, but they are distinct. M.G. Smith gave some useful definitions here.
Okay.
What's power? Power, simply put, is the ability to act independently, to make someone do something even if they resist.
Right. Raw capability.
Exactly. It's not necessarily institutionalized. It might not even be effective all the time. Think of, like you said, a bully using threats. That's power.
Okay. So how is authority different?
Authority is power that has been made legitimate. It's the set of institutionalized rules, procedures, norms that people in a society accept as binding.
So it's socially recognized, accepted power.
Precisely. Authority gives the person who holds it the right to exercise power according to those accepted rules.
They go hand in hand then.
Usually, yes. We often talk about power that is socially recognized being used by the person who holds authority. The contrast is really clear when you look at how order is maintained.
How so?
In a state, the law provides the authority.
Mhm.
The police officer has the power to use force, but the law gives them the authority to do so under specific circumstances.
Got it. The badge represents the authority.
Exactly. But in many stateless societies, there's no formal law in that sense, no police force. So where does the authority come from?
We saw that with the Maasai elders.
Right. It often comes from tradition, kinship roles, or crucially, the fear of the supernatural. The elders have authority because people believe disobeying them will bring supernatural punishment. That belief system grants the legitimacy.
So authority is the acceptable, legitimate use of power within a specific social system.
Perfect way to put it. It's the difference between someone mugging you, raw power, and the government garnishing your wages for taxes, authorized power.
Okay, that distinction is crucial, and it leads directly into our final area we need to discuss, the nature of law and justice in simple societies, citing suitable examples.
Right. So when anthropologists talk about law in simple societies, they're often using a broad definition, like Hobel's. Law is basically any social norm that, if breached, is met with some kind of recognized counteraction, an institution that checks deviance.
Okay, but no courts or police.
Generally absent, yes. So enforcement doesn't come from specialized agencies. It comes from what Radcliffe Brown termed social sanctions.
Social sanction, like
That's-
peer pressure.
That's part of it, but it's broader. It's the whole range of society's reactions, approval for following norms, disapproval for breaking them. The threat of negative sanctions is what primarily maintains order.
And in these kin-based societies, what's the most powerful negative sanction? What do people fear the most?
Overwhelmingly, it's the breakdown of reciprocity.
Explain that a bit more.
Well, in simple societies, your survival literally depends on your kin group. You need their help for food, for defense, for marriage partners, for everything.
Right, you can't just go it alone.
Exactly. So the most terrifying threat is the possibility that your kin will withdraw their support. Ostracism, refusal to help you, that's potentially a death sentence. That fear of losing vital cooperation is the ultimate sanction.
Wow, so the law effectively is don't alienate your family.
In many ways, yes. Other sanctions are powerful too, of course. Public opinion and mockery, psychological pressure. And ritual sanctions, which tie into that fear of the supernatural.
Like the Maasai elders again, or the Santhals you mentioned.
Exactly. The belief that breaking rules is a sin that will bring automatic, magical, or divine punishment.
Okay, now what's the actual goal of the justice process in these systems? Is it like our courts trying to determine guilt and assign punishment?
Generally, no. The primary goal is usually quite different. It's about maintaining harmony and restoring social order.
Harmony, not punishment.
Right. The focus is on reconciliation, on getting the groups or individuals back into a working relationship. That's why the resolution mechanisms are often soft.
Like the Inuit song duels.
Perfect example. Or the Nuer leopard skin chief mediating a feud. The aim is to stop the conflict and reintegrate people, not necessarily to make one side pay in the way we think of it.
So if punishment isn't the main goal, how do they even establish guilt if there's a dispute about facts? No detectives, no DNA evidence?
They rely heavily on oath and ordeal, again, leveraging that deep-seated belief in the supernatural.
The oath example from the Santhals.
Yes. The accused takes a solemn oath, often invoking powerful forces like Daram Daram. The community believes that if the person is lying, those forces will strike them down. The oath itself is considered evidence because of the perceived danger of lying under it.
It's a powerful system then, because belief is universal and everyone is embedded in that web of kinship.
Exactly. There's often no clear line between what we'd call crime and sin. And crucially, there's nowhere to run. You can't just leave town and escape your reputation or your kin obligations. Social pressure is inescapable.
Which arguably makes it incredibly effective at maintaining order, even without a formal state apparatus.
Often very effective, yes. It prioritizes social cohesion above all else.
Wow. Okay, we have covered an enormous amount of ground there. From song duels as court cases, to chiefs managing economies through feasts, to the sheer power of kinship, it's really clear that political systems are shaped by necessity and culture.
Absolutely. Let's try and quickly recap the main points from each of our 6 areas just to lock them in.
Good idea. Active recall. Okay, first, we defined political anthropology. What was the key takeaway?
Its broad scope studying power, authority, leadership everywhere, including stateless societies, focusing on the maintenance of social order, not just formal governments.
Right. Then we dove into the types of stateless systems. Acephalous, egalitarian.
Yeah, we saw the range. Simple nomadic bands using consensus, like the Inuit song duels, village-based groups with advisory councils, age-set systems using supernatural belief for enforcement, Maasai elders, and lineage-based societies where kinship provides structure, Nuer leopard skin chief.
Okay. Third, we compared state and stateless organizations. What was the fundamental difference in how they keep order?
The state uses potential physical force backed by formal law and bureaucrats. Stateless systems rely on social sanctions, especially reciprocity, kinship pressure, and sometimes supernatural fear. Territory is also key to find boundaries for states, often fluid for stateless.
Got it. Then fourth, we looked at chiefdoms, the bridge category.
Right. Centralized, with a full-time chief holding real authority, crucially linked to the economy through redistribution via feasts, building loyalty, and justifying the chief's status. Justice often involves ordeals.
Fifth, we clarified power and authority. What's the nutshell difference?
Power is raw capacity to act against resistance. Authority is institutionalized, socially recognized, legitimate power based on accepted rules or beliefs.
Perfect. And finally, sixth, we discuss law and justice in simple societies.
Key points. Law enforced by social sanctions, not police. The most feared sanction is loss of reciprocity, kin support. The goal is harmony and restoration, not punishment. Guilt often determined by oath and ordeal.
Fantastic recap. Now, thinking about that connection to today, we operate in complex states with laws and contracts. But think about, say, your workplace or maybe even your university department. We talked about rules and policies.
Sure. HR manuals, codes of conduct.
Exactly. But how much of our day-to-day compliance, our willingness to follow the unwritten rules, is still driven by those ancient mechanisms, like fear of negative public opinion, losing colleagues' respect, or damaging our network, that loss of reciprocity?
That's a really insightful point. Those older social controls are probably still incredibly powerful, even within formal state structures. We don't always recognize them.
Something to think about. And here's one final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. We saw that the goal of justice in many simple societies is explicitly harmony and restoration. In modern states, while restoration is sometimes a goal, often the emphasis feels more like punishment and retribution.
A very different focus.
So the question is, which approach, harmony-focused or punishment-focused, do you think ultimately leads to a more stable, resilient, long-lasting community? Something to ponder. Keep exploring those sources.